Welcome to today's video, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at sunny side up design, so SSUPD MESHROOM D, and it's not your regular SSUPD case, right? Because usually it's vertical, this one is horizontal, and it has a different approach, let's put it this way. It's, I would say, somewhat a regular mini ITX case in horizontal position, where you place your components in a regular way. And we are actually going to go and discuss it a bit differently, because I got this additional bottom panel and I used it immediately. I didn't even go with the stock one, because right here we're limited to a couple of things, and specifically if you go with a thicker graphic card, and of course we get more space for the intake for the GPU and loads of other stuff. But as you already know from the SSUPD cases before and earlier that I reviewed, you get three sides, this time three sides of mesh panels, and the bottom panel is also meshed but with a dust filter, which is magnetic, and you just actually easily remove it out and place it back in. So when we're talking about the design of this case, it resembles to the older ones without any discussion, and you have the side part the same as all of these which are visible. The thing that they kept from the older version is that the power supply button, the power on button, is here at the back, which is also removable, so it kind of gives you an option to change it up a bit, but we'll get to that part quite soon, and I'll discuss that also. Now, front panel, top panel, side panels, they're all mesh and removable with pegs. The only thing that I do have to say is that if we're going with pegs, I would consider going with, I would say, easier way of removing them, because what happened to me is I pulled out the side panel and it just popped out of my hand and fell on the floor, right? So eventually destroying it, but it wasn't that bad, right? So take that into consideration. You do need to first pop out this top panel to be able to access the front, and then from inner part somehow push out the side panels, giving you a possibility to remove those. Now the cool thing is that you have two possibilities to mount your power supply. You can mount it here on the side as I did, which let me just show you. Here we go. So you can see it's here on the side. So what I did is I placed the intake for the fan of the power supply here at the back, so it doesn't take any air that is hot from the inner part of the case and blows it out here on front, which is cool because we don't have any fans in this case except for the GPU power supply and the CPU tower cooler. Now, going forward with the power supply, it also brings us to the point where you can actually go with an ATX power supply, and in that scenario where it's hanging from the top, first you have, I would say, somewhat limitations when we're talking about the power supply cord cable going, well, cord cable is the same thing, but the power supply cable going from the back here above the GPU, then going somewhere here around and trying to wiggle it up here on top. What I did is I did still that, but it goes here in the front, and all the unnecessary cables are placed here in front, because you do have some sort of a space between the bracket and the front panel, and then I connected it to the power supply. So kind of makes it more easier to manage. But what I wanted to say is placing the power supply in this vertical position kind of makes it easier for the cables to be rerouted. And if you go with an SFX power supply, specifically I went with Cooler Master V1100. First of all, I use only 3 cables. I have 24 pin, I have 8 pin EPS, and I have 12 VHP WR. That's it. Unless you need some SATA, you're gonna go with that. But here I used 3 cables. Literally, I don't need anything else. If you're going with M.2, ITX motherboards can support front and back ITX, front and back M.2 slots. So that's good. You can invest more in your M.2 SSDs and get rid of cable clutter. Of course, the cable management here, I did this really quickly, but I think the cable management here can be done much better. There's no space for 12 VHP WR going properly, I would say. The cable that I got with V1100 is bent by 90 degrees factory, so it kind of does help a lot when we're doing this. right? So you have the possibility to mount it. This is GeForce RTX 4070 Phoenix GS, which you already seen a couple of million times in my videos. But regardless of that, it's a big card. When we take into consideration past generation, new generation, this is 3-slot GPU, only occupies 2 slots for mounting, and it goes almost straight to the front part. It is a bit needed to wiggle it when you're placing it inside. But do take that into consideration that it fits, and I'm gonna go through dimensions and all that quite shortly. Now this part right here for the power supply mounting, it can be mounted on top, it can be mounted on front, and this gives you the ability, as already stated, to reroute the cables quite nicely, because you have loads of space from your ITX motherboard, and you can place a micro ATX motherboard as well. But if you go with this configuration, mini ITX, SFX, you can go with loads of cables and you won't even notice them, because the SFX power supply is much slimmer than your standard ATX, and you have loads of space here at the back then to reroute the cables, giving you a possibility to make a nice cable management even in such small case. I mean, I did loads of stuff with the MESHROOM S, with the MESHROOM as well, especially with the MESHROOM, what I did with custom loop and extending and adding extenders and all the other stuff. So this isn't a surprise, to be honest. Now, what I wanted to mention is the bottom compartment. You have to buy it separately, so it's not coming stock with the case. And as you can see, it's quite slimmer. It's lower for 1.5 centimeters. So you get loads of space beneath the GPU to be able to pull the air from the bottom. When you do this, the GPU is lower to the table. You have 0.5 centimeter from the legs and from the bottom part of the chassis for GPU to pull air from the bottom. So this kind of helps the GPU, and I could place some fans here. In this scenario, I most likely wouldn't be able to do that. So I left it without the fans just to see how it will react, because adding additional fans can only help the case additionally. I wanted to give you some, let's say, raw benchmarks so you can have a clue what it is and how it is going and stuff like that. So here at the back we can also mount a pump, we can mount a fan, you can basically do everything, because you have loads of holes here going out, and you can actually do wonders. I could actually place the Arctic 10K fan right here, but I wanted to go, as I said, raw with only fans that you have here. In addition to that, what happens when you swap the bottom panel, right? So you lose two USB 3.0, you use USB Type-C, but you gain loads of other stuff. In addition to that, while removing this panel, I also removed the power button at the back. Now, from the past cases from Sunny Side Up Design, some of you guys wrote a comment that you can't handle the power supply button being at the back to power it on, even though it's really straightforward. You just do something like this and you press it at the back. It's not, how would I say, it's not really there, okay? Let's put it that way. But with this panel, with this bottom panel, what you get is quite loads of stuff. So let's check it out. So we have two USB 3.0, two USB 2.0, we have USB Type-C, you have 3.5mm audio jack for your microphone and for your headset, so two 3.5mm jacks. You get reset button, power button, and the LED indication light. This really makes this expansion quite outstanding. First of all, the cables can be rerouted quite nicely if you add this part, because you can place them beneath the GPU and they don't obstruct the airflow. And you can reroute them quite nicely, connect everything towards your motherboard and not worry a single thing about this. Also, we have, except for the GPU, I placed the AMD Ryzen 7 Pro 7745, because I didn't want to go with something too extreme, since the GPU isn't that extreme in those, let's say, mid-range, okay, mid-range. I know the power supply is a bit too high and overkill for this configuration, but what I wanted to do is check out the space. It's not about the wattage, it's about the space, because you can get a smaller power supply like this one, but with a lower wattage, so you don't have to buy 1100 watts of power. Now the cables can be rerouted, as already stated, quite nicely. I actually went with only LEDs on the GPU because this case looks quite nice without any lights shining through. And after all, when you place the side panels, you can't see anything inside. Now also for reference, I use Noctua's NH-D9L Chromax Black, so it kind of fits really nicely. When we're talking about the motherboard, we have B650i Lightning from ASRock, and right here we have Team Group T Create DDR5 memories. So yeah, it kind of is a cool small blackout build, except for the LEDs. I could switch them off, but placing white light here kind of does look subtle and nice. All in all, quite nice. Now let's go to the specs. So when we're talking about the expansion slots for your GPU, you have 3.4 front I/O ports for the lower bracket, one USB 3.1 generation 2 Type-C and two USB 3.0. It supports maximum 6 2.5-inch SSDs. Top and front panel, including the side panels, are designed as a fine mesh panel, so as you already know, prevents dust from entering, but still is wide enough to give nice airflow. Rear fan mounts, you have one 80mm or one 92mm, which aren't included obviously. Right side fan mounts, you can mount one 80mm or one 92mm with power supply mounted on front left. The only dust filters that we have are at the bottom, and it's a kind of toolless push to lock design for all sides, except if you need to remove the bracket. For the power supply, if you want to swap these panels or if you want to mount the radiator sideways. The power button is located at the back, but as stated, if you go with the lower compartment, you can place it on front and keep it there. Maximum of 3.5-inch hard drives, you can go with 3 with an SFX power supply or 2 3.5-inch hard drives with an ATX power supply. Front fan mounts, one 120 or 140 with an SFX power supply mounted at the top, or left side fan mounts, two 120 or two 140 with power supply mounted on front right or top. So the compatibility, you can go with mini ITX or mini DTX. They also stated you could go with micro ATX, which I think it could fit, but with the other compartment. CPU cooler height, maximum height is 142mm without the side fan bracket installed. 138mm with the side fan bracket installed. GPU maximum length is 325mm and height is 140, 336mm length and 140 height if the front I/O ports are removed. So basically the bottom panel gives you so much options with this case, because I get longer GPU, I get front access with more ports and a power button and a reset button and an LED indication light if you want to go with that. Talking about power supplies, we can go with ATX, SFX L and SFX. Maximum length for the ATX power supply, if it's left side mounted on the power supply bracket, it goes up to 160mm, 140mm if it's right side mounted on the PCU bracket. If you desire to go with a radiator or in those terms AIO, I would definitely suggest mounting the AIO on the side with these brackets that you have right here, which will definitely give you more options for your GPU, the thickness for the GPU, the length and everything else, and you don't have to worry about the tubes or anything else because the tubes will be swirled up here in front of the pump block top. And when we're talking about the general sum specifications, we have case dimensions 247 times 167 times 363mm. The total weight is 3.2 kilos and the volume is 14.97 liters. In the box you get the MESHROOM D case, of course, accessory box with screws and parts including zip ties, user manual and the power supply extender cable. The power supply extender cable is basically already installed inside the case, so it's up to you to, well, basically there's only one position to mount it. Now let's go to the benchmark. So AIDA64 Extreme Edition 40 minutes test. I really went with this one and totally forgot it was running. At this point, CPU with this cooler went up to 77 degrees Celsius, which I do have to say is quite alright. And the clock speed was 4850 megahertz. GPU went up to 66 degrees Celsius, which, as I stated, this thicker bottom part gives the ability to the GPU to pull air quite nicely, because even though it's blocked here, it still has enough room to pull the air from the bottom and making a even better intake. Now, Cinebench R23, 75 degrees Celsius on the CPU throughout the whole 10 benchmarks. The clock speed was, I would say, constantly going 4775, eventually 4 times reach 4750 megahertz, and the Cinebench scores were roughly around 17,100. The CPU scores could go much better if you, for instance, play with better cooling in terms of the height, better passive heatsink on the CPU tower cooler, because I still have loads of space here with this CPU tower cooler. Even though it's cold and it's blowing quite nicely and it's working quite nicely and everything else, and you've seen the review of the Noctua NH-D9L Chromax Black. But regardless of that, there's still loads of potential here. I could place a fan here. I could use one of these brackets, right? So I place them right here, and that's going to be tight, but let's see. Yeah, I could place them right here, something like that. But the problem is you don't have any holes up here to mount them. So the thing is, you can mod it, of course. You can go with that route and have the possibility to add 3 100mm or 3 80mm fans right here on top, giving it additional exhaust to help the CPU tower cooler dissipate the heat, which is outstanding. And of course you can place another fan right here, but you don't have any intake, which could be something completely different. Then we're taking all the fans to an exhaust, and well, in that case couldn't be that bad. And of course at the bottom you could add fans, not in this scenario, or depending on the thickness of the GPU, but in this scenario you could definitely do it as such. All in all, I would say quite solid case, and I would definitely suggest going immediately with the bottom panel, just to add, if you don't want to go with the fans at the bottom and create additional cable clutter, definitely suggesting this to add more intake, just because of the reason part, even though it's only 5mm here, but still you have a couple of centimeters from the GPU to the bottom plate, because in that scenario you're avoiding 12, 14 or eventually 16 screws, because you do have to remove the power button at the back. Removing 16 screws, placing everything back, doing the cable management right up on front, and in that scenario you don't have to remove the GPU, reroute everything again, and doing the double job for nothing. This is something that I would definitely suggest if you don't mind raising it up for 2.5 centimeters, which would be, I don't think that's raising 2.5 centimeters. I think it's more like 2 or 1.8 centimeters, which is still quite alright. In this scenario it's not 14.97 liters anymore, it's a bit more, but nothing too drastic that should worry you. In all of that scenario, yeah, the links for the SSUPD MESHROOM D is in the description. Alongside, I'll try to find the bottom panel as well, so you don't have to worry about finding it additionally or anything else. If I don't, I'll try to make it up somehow to find it, so you don't have to search the web that much. And that'll be all for today. The links are in the description. You can always, if you wish and if you desire, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, click the notification bell, and of course leave a comment if you have some additional questions, that I'll try to answer it for you guys as soon as possible. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye bye.